the more I've kind of sat back and reflected on it, I just think it's complete rubbish. And I really, really worry that there are people out there who genuinely believe it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Undocked. Hello, Nick.
Hello, Raal. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm fully refreshed after our trip into the Philippines. I was robbed of sleep, but sort of imbibed with community and joy and positivity. So
That's nice.
Net, on a net basis, I'm up.
Who needs sleep anyway? It's overrated.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a long way. It's a long way, Manila.
It's a long way to Manila. That's my third album. It is a long way to Manila. And the weird thing is, I was thinking about this, and I'd love to get your perspective on it as well, and anyone watching. But like, there's the thing that happens. Obviously, I'm being very Eurocentric about this, because a lot of us Europeans kind of descend on Manila, and we spend that week in a sort of ethereal fog, where you're just like, it doesn't matter, even if you go a couple of days early and trying to acclimatize, you're in a kind of sort of constant sort of slightly dreamy sort of state, which is kind of, it can be quite sort of hard when you're sort of trying to do serious thinking. But at the same time, you're in a realm where you're very sort of susceptible to kind of ideas and things like that. So it's kind of, it's an interesting one.
What idea did you pick up? Have you been inceptioned by something while you were out there?
I think that Crew Connect is positioned really in an interesting sweet spot in the year, because inevitably it's wrapping up, the year that you're in. Yeah. But it's also, because it's just by virtue of where it is in November, it's the last big event for most of us in the year. So you're sort of wrapping that up, and then obviously it's looking ahead to what are going to be the themes in the coming year as well. So yeah, I think it's very, very important. But that's my perspective. Let's talk about your perspective on it. Today's episode is brought to you by Orbit MI. In shipping, fuel is money. Orbit MI helps you use less of it. Their optimization solutions improve routing, speed management, and emissions performance, helping you cut costs while staying sustainable. Imagine saving fuel and reducing emissions without sacrificing operational efficiency. That's the Orbit MI way. Built on AI and made for the connected maritime era, Orbit MI delivers results fleet-wide, smarter voyages, stronger margins, greener operations. Learn more at orbitmi.com/connected-maritime-era.
I came away with a bit of a gripe. On reflection, on the very long flight back, I found myself questioning that this kind of narrative seems to be developing about generational differences, and particularly around Gen Z, and the idea that anyone in Gen Z, you have to capture their attention in 30 seconds. And if it's not a TikTok video, it's not going to be interesting to them. And so we need to totally transform how we do things like crew training and competence management to make it suitable for this generation with a really short attention span. And the more I've heard it over the 2 days I was there, and then the more I've kind of sat back and reflected on it, I just think it's complete rubbish. And I really, really worry that there are people out there who genuinely believe it, but then also want to put those same people in charge of a $50 million asset that's safety critical. And it's over time, it's really, really started to bug me, because I remember, to paraphrase Tony Blair and David Cameron, when they were resigning as Prime Minister, I was the future once. I remember 10 years ago when I came ashore, people used to say it about the millennial generation. And like, the notes have changed slightly, but the tune's exactly the same. And I just don't buy it at all. I work with various people on our team who are Gen Zs, I think, and I just don't see it. I do not see. There are good people and there are less good people, but I do not see that it's a generational divide at all. And so I just kind of want to put that on the record, possibly on behalf of young people, to say, like, young people have an attention span, and young people do not need their training to be served up in 30-second video increments.
Well, I could not agree with you more. I mean, I think it's condescending and patronizing and utterly facile. Young people don't seem to have a massive attention span problem with watching box sets on Netflix for hours on end, or watching 3-hour-long movies, or playing Grand Theft Auto for hours and hours and hours. It's not like they can't concentrate. It's certainly, I think, the case that they've been brought up in a world which is clamoring for their attention, and has certainly positioned them in the center of their universe. If you're being constantly fed things that are algorithmically to your tastes, and you have all these brands clamoring for eyeballs and stuff like that, of course that's going to kind of affect the way that you see yourself in the center of things. But yeah, I think that there's 2 points to this. I think one, it's enormously patronizing to an entire generation. I was on a panel once, or I was watching a panel rather, and someone actually said on stage, yeah, because young people don't like to be pigeonholed, do they? Thus pigeonholing an entire generation. So number one is sort of talking about a generation in those terms. Number two, I think it denies the fact that the seafaring population both is different and needs to be different for the reasons that you said. There's some very good colleague of mine in the industry made a fantastic point to me about like the sort of the needs of individuals, and the fact that again, pigeonholing a generation, saying that they need to be treated as individuals. And so, she was saying, well, it really isn't the place for you if you want to be an individual, because the whole thing is based on us all kind of collectively working and following sort of quite strict command and control structures, and, being a rank, being and those kind of things. So again, I think there's those sort of two aspects. The third aspect, which I think is very seductive, particularly if you're old. I've got years on you, so it's even more true of me. There is this sort of this kind of performative thing to kind of like sort of talk about, relating to young people. But like, of course we need to think about generation coming through, but age profiles in our industry are actually rising for a lot of the key roles. And if we're not careful, we start to kind of gear everything. And we talked about gamification last week. I've been guilty of this as well. Gearing things towards that generation. We have actually got to keep an enormous amount of older talent in there and enable a lot more of an older cohort in a increasingly complex technological world. So there's my three dimensions. But yeah, I share your irritation. I just thought that was because I was old though. So
yeah, it came up a lot over probably more than it should over a kind of 36-hour. I was there for about 36 hours, and it felt like every conversation became like a generational question. And actually, I found the best presentation of the week, and possibly one of the best presentations I've seen all year, bar none, was the one that was delivered by the IMEC cadets, where they did this absolutely stunningly good cybersecurity presentation that was all about cyber risk management. And they basically had spent the week tricking all of the delegates into being hacked in various kind of simulated ways, putting QR codes up around the venue and all this sort of stuff. And then the final presentation of the day was them kind of sharing the results of that, and then sharing the best practice, what they should do, what they shouldn't do. And it was just so well put together. And it probably went on for, I don't know, a good half hour. And it it kind of punched me in the face as like a total counterpoint to this apparent generation of people who have no attention span and can't pull anything together if it's longer than 30 seconds. So I wanted to just put that on the record as a gripe. I'm glad you agree with it. And I kind of hope we move to a slightly more nuanced conversation in future.
Yeah, would be good.
I've got one other seafarer related story, if you like. Splash, our mutual friend Sam Chambers, does these kind of special reports through the course of the year. They've just done a Seafarers Report, which I don't know if it was coincidence, but it went out about the same week as Crew Connect happened. And so while on my, I think something like 38 hours of plane rides, by the time I'd landed, I'd been able to go through the whole thing. And there was one story in particular that I really found interesting, and it was about bringing seafarers onto the boards of shipping companies. So in some ways, a bit of a kind of clarion call to say, if you don't have a seafarer on your board, then how are you getting the kind of voice of a seafarer at the very top level? And there are kind of two ways to go about that. One is put a seafarer on the board and they can kind of be that voice. Two is actually send the board to sea once a year, which I quite liked. Anyone on your board should go to sea for a couple of weeks a year, spend real time with the crew. Our friend of the show, Bjorn, who came on a few weeks ago, I just saw a post by him the other day that he'd spent a couple of weeks on board one of their ships. I think you can create the kind of spit and polish version when an auditor comes on for a few hours, or when the CEO comes on for a few hours, everyone can kind of put the smile on and all that sort of stuff. But by the time you're 2, 3, 4 days in, if there is a mask there, it slips, and you'll really start to see how life is actually like on board. And I thought that was a really nice way of doing it. And then there was a few other things that suggested that things like having crew councils, or bringing all of the exec team and the board to all the seafaring conferences as well that are held, across a large ship management company. I just thought it was a really interesting conversation to have, because I think, again, if you kind of wind the clock back 15, 20, 25 years, most leadership teams from shipping companies had worked at sea, and that's probably still majority the case today. But life at sea now is materially different from life at sea 10 years ago. And I say this as someone who worked at sea 10 years ago, and I feel totally out of touch to what life at sea is like now. And so I think having that voice going between the two, between the very, very top of an organization and the ships themselves, I think has become really important. And so, yeah, it's well worth a read if you're kind of interested in that topic, the report generally, but also that particular.
I'm surprised I missed it, actually, because I do follow their reports. I normally look forward to them. This topic that you mentioned there, I mean, it came up in our discussion with Bjorn Højgaard, as you mentioned. And he was one of the first people that got me thinking about that. We were at one of Sam and Grant's events, Maritime CEO event in Monaco some time back. And Bjorn was talking about connectivity in those terms, in terms of it making possible and things that weren't before. Like one, I don't think he mentioned the board, but it was talking about, like, if you're having a morning meeting, why isn't someone from the office actually there? Vice versa, can bring a seafarer in. Norway is, of course, extremely progressive. Anyone who does business in Norway will know this, that you have obligations to have employees on the board represented there, so that there are no discussions that take place without them or without their representation, which I think is very, very progressive. And so this is, for me, this is a really kind of exciting idea. And it's one of the things that, as I say, that connectivity suddenly removes the safety blanket of, we'd love to, but it's logistically very, very difficult. And then to say the flip of that, which the other thing you mentioned was about bringing the people on the vessel. And I saw that post as well. I think one of the things that I can tell you from that is my time with Videotel. We used to do a lot of filming on board vessels. And one of the things that we did very successfully was get seafarers to play the roles. So we didn't,
Oh, really?
Yeah. Occasionally you need to do some very specific, drama, quite often with where there's a heavy story element, and you would need to take actors in who could obviously stay true to the script and everything. But normally, even in that case, when actors were present, you would have parts being played by the seafarers. But more often than not, you would be sending a film crew on, and you'd be relying on the seafarers themselves to demonstrate, certain scenarios and things like that. Acting, basically, which they would love, it's something kind of different. And some of them were really great performers. But the interesting thing was that, talking to the directors, there was one guy in particular who used to get fantastic performances out of the seafarers he worked with. They would always do, minimum would be a 5-day voyage. And the reason was that to get those performances, you needed to establish that trust.
Yeah.
And so in port, you're too busy as well. So either end, the port call is just, you're not going to get anything, and it's not fair to ask people that are having all these other things to worry about. But the first couple of days would be to establish the trust, to get comfortable, and then the magic sort of happens. And I think it's the same, exactly as you say. It's a bit like, we say about the Queen, there's that old joke about everything smells of paint. She thinks the world smells of paint because everyone, before she would go anywhere, they'd redecorate.
That's very funny.
And I think there's probably an element of that as well. If you're a sort of senior person visiting the shop floor, as it were, people are going to be on guard, and they're going to be very keen for you to see sort of everything shiny, and you're not maybe going to get the real story. So I think that the voyage versus the visit is a really interesting thing, and I think 100% justifiable for all the reasons that you would say. I'll give one little shout out as well. A career highlight was once doing a lot of work with BSM, Bernard Schulte Ship Management. And we were at that time trying to kind of, or exploring in a piloting phase, you might say, of virtual reality. And Eva Rodriguez, a good friend of mine, was chatting to her about sort of, whether BSM would be interested in this. And she said, well, we're having a get together. So why don't you come and join in? And it was a skiing trip.
Nice.
Which you might say, oh, that sounds like a nice kind of perk, doesn't it? Going skiing in Austria. But this was something that they did. And I can't remember how many there were. It was a reasonably big group. I think from memory around about sort of 20 people, something like that. And they had people from the CEO at the time was Ian Beveridge, was there. They had all the way down to cadets. So from every slice. And they would do, kind of skiing in the morning. And then the afternoon, they would be sat there in deep conversation about like really kind of germane subjects to the entire operation. And that was just fantastic. It was a fantastic thing to be part of. And having that connection between the very top of the organization and some of the more junior people was really, great to witness. And of course, having that element, that social element there, again, it sort of breaks those barriers down that you're doing something, fun together, and then getting into some serious discussions. And, again, like great ideas that can suddenly come through and reach the right ears. That can be quite transformational. So, initiatives like that, I think, are really, really welcome. I think you can tell a lot about an organization by what you see in terms of the availability and authenticity of senior people, and how they relate to everyone in that organization. And the other shout out I give on that is just from last week. OSM Thome, their slogan is all about people. Known them as a client for a long time now, working with them on a really exciting project, and seeing how they show up with every layer of their organization is just, it's in the DNA, and that's, I think it means the world. It's easy thing to say, harder thing to demonstrate, I think.
Well, on that, a double shout out to Tommy Olofsen, who is a chaired Crew Connect and always does a stunningly good job of it every year. Makes for a really good 2 days of really interesting discussion, but also on his new job, because he's just been appointed as, is it Group MD?
Yes. So effectively, the change in title and stuff, I think it reflects more of the organisation of because Finn Armand, he's replacing Finn Armand. Finn Armand was Chief Executive Officer. So I think he is the
top
main
dog,
man, as it were, with a different title due to I think it's just the governance of the group.
Well, we were talking in one of the breaks, and we were talking about the podcast, and it's nice that he listens. And I said, well, you should come on the show. And he said, oh, I don't know what we'd talk about. And then a week later, it was announced that he was replacing the CEO. And I was like, well, so if you're listening, Tommy, you now have to come on the show.
Well, Tommy has one of these, as you know, a very, very mischievous sense of humour. And I'm quite sure that when he said that to you, he was in full knowledge that he had plenty to talk about. I actually asked him to be on the show, like right at the beginning, and he did say yes, but I think he's going to have to work. He's no doubt going to be a busy man in the meantime.
True.
But I think it's really interesting place that they're in right now. Obviously, the merger between OSM and Thome, which gives us OSM Thome. Tommy has been working in the role of Chief Services Officer. So that's kind of like moving from just the, say, traditional sort of technical management, crew management into service office as well. So they've got sort of, catering, medical, some of these, and I can't remember, it caught me flat-footed, but there is, the amount of revenue generated by ship management companies now in the service field, which obviously gives them a much wider number of customers. So there might be customers, the people that want to still carry on technically managing their own ships, but they want to be able to leverage the scale and the services that a ship manager provides. The other example of that would be V Group do, or V as they are now. They've had this very big service approach for a long time, and it's a demonstration of the diversification of ship management and how people work with their partners. So yeah.
But it's the kind of the persistent challenge of PE-backed ship management. So like all the top ship managers now are PE-backed, and there's only 50,000 ships. So beyond stealing ships from one ship manager to another, there has to be other ways to kind of expand the value of the organization. And I think that services element, and also increasingly now we see a technology element, is becoming increasingly important as a kind of way of driving value for those investors.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I don't think people are investing in that necessarily just to get market share. I think it's about diversification, and it's about the whole supply chain potentially.
Awesome. What have you got this week, Raal?
Well, Nick, you're a busy man, right? I observed this. Increasingly hard to get hold of you, much to my chagrin. Have you ever thought of creating a digital twin of yourself?
Of myself?
Yeah. Now, let's just kind of...
No.
No.
I don't want to... I'm not sure I'd want to inflict it on the world.
Well, let me fill you in. So digital twins in the shipping industry are commonplace, right? They're fairly well established. So we're talking about using the ship model that we start off with, using sort of, various analytical tools and stuff to create on the shore something that mirrors the ship. And of course, there's lots of ways in which we use those. So we might use them to sort of for predictive maintenance, might be one, might be for optimizations to the route, to the fuel consumption, all of that kind of stuff. We can model and test and all that sort of stuff. But this is a kind of fairly well-known and well-trodden approach to take. But have you ever considered the possibility that the same thing could work for people as works for ships? I should start off by saying this is not a particularly new thing in a medical sphere. Okay, so we've seen some sort of applications of this where, again, for the same kind of reasons, you want to, you don't want to start messing and testing around on a human body, but you can stuff. So the medical application is if you Google digital twin application for people, you're going to find a lot of stuff which is, I'm sure, fascinating, but perhaps out of the wheelhouse of this podcast.
This is starting to feel like the beginning of an episode of Black Mirror.
Right.
You're making me a bit nervous.
Should, because Vivien, a company called Vivien, would very much like to help you to make a digital twin of yourself. Let's talk about them for a second. So Vivien is I would say, a sort of startup, early stage business that caught my eye in the week. And I kind of went down this rabbit hole, and I'd love to get your reaction to it. So their vision is a future where knowledge never disappears and humans focus on creativity, leadership, and connection while their twins handle the rest. This potentially is now starting to appeal to you a little bit more. They position that knowledge leak in organizations today costs, I think they put it down, 31.5 billion every year. How they arrive at that, wow. I have no idea. So there's three dimensions that they're pushing on, right? One, non-availability of you, right? When you're out of the office. And they point to the fact that many of us, and this is why it's particularly relevant to shipping, are working in these global teams where we have big time zone differences, and we have people on planes, and we have people asleep while we're in the middle of a meeting and we need them. So this is one of their kind of key things, right? So when you're not there, your twin can step in. Number two, classic one, you've moved on, your knowledge is now lost to the business. Right. Okay, so knowledge walks out the door, this is your chance to capture it. So we'll come back to the ethics of some of these kind of points in there. But how does it work fundamentally? First of all, so it's picking up everything that you do within your working ecosystem. So it's your emails, it's your meeting recordings that are in there as well. You've got everything you've put into the knowledge base of the company. All of that stuff is indexed. All of that stuff is building a picture of you So the idea is then that once all of that stuff is then captured, you've got like from what I can see, it looks like a kind of a ChatGPT, but it's not just like the internet. It's very much you. It's your responses. It's going to respond as you. You're not appearing as a video. We'll come to that in a moment. But this is the premise, right? And it gives you one of the examples it gives is that the CEO's in the board meeting. He's asked a difficult question. He can just kind of go to the virtual twin of his head of sales and go, how are we with the so-and-so account? And it comes back with the last kind of iterations, stuff like that. And he's like, he gets to kind of like pretend he's got it all in his head or whatever. The other one is there's a team meeting, but the team leader is on holiday. There's a particularly saccharine shot of her playing guitar by the beach. And the team are stuck, and they just need to know like what decisions she'd come to about a supplier or something. And they kind of look up, they have a chat with their digital twin, and the digital twin gives them the latest of what happened before she went away. So two kind of like little scenarios there. And as I say, we'll come back to the implications of some of this stuff. So they've raised around it's a couple of guys, both of whom have worked in for Facebook and Google and all these other people we trust with our data. Nothing to be worried about there. And they've raised 35 million in seed money, which is not huge amounts. But as I say, this kind of like kicked me off into a bit of a rabbit hole, because there are other people, it turns out, that are looking at this as well. And one of which, a company called Expertwin, which is a very similar concept, but their focus is more on human amplification, right? So here it's not just about, oh, Nick's away, I'm just going to kind of get a bit of information on Nick. It's like Nick can be scaled. And so they're talking about like from a consultancy business. So what's the problem? If you're looking at a gorgeous consultancy business, which has really high impact, really nice, your multiple is going to be bad because every time you scale, you need to find another expert, SME, subject matter expert in your business who can cope with that. They're talking about these kind of consultancy businesses. That why should only such and such an account have the top guy working on that account when the top guy can now work on all of the accounts, right? So this is the amplification bit. And then I'm just going to leave you with one, before I get your reaction, one final thing that they introduced that I hadn't seen elsewhere is a marketplace, right? So we don't just want a Nick who's working at Theseus, then we'll have a Nick for Digital Ship as well, because you bought that business, so you need to be there. But you could also go work for loads of other people as well, because your digital clone can be activated as a turnkey solution, maybe by the hour. I mean, I don't know how you want to do it, Nick. So I'll stop there. What's your reaction? Do you want a digital twin now, or do you want to kind of get on that marketplace?
So I feel quite torn about it. There are elements I love and elements I really hate about that. So let me start with the things I hate. But a big part of what I've tried to do in building the now businesses that we're building is find really good people and then empower them to make decisions. And so generally speaking, with some exceptions, I'm only really available to the team internally on Mondays and Fridays. And Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, I'm out and about. I'm creating content or I'm speaking to clients, whatever. And we have deliberately built a structure that is designed to give autonomy to the people we bring in, mainly because more often than not, they're actually smarter than the leadership and actually know the real kind of ins and outs of what's required. We're 6 years in. That's probably been the last 2 to 3 years we've been working on that and building that muscle in the organization and coaching people to feel empowered to be able to take decisions. If suddenly there was a version of me in the organization that was instantly available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that someone could go and ask to, all of that autonomy just gets totally taken away. So now the analysts or salespeople, whoever it is, they can just turn around and say, what should I do about X? And they will get an answer, which 9 times out of 10, the answer I would give as a human is wrong. So why would the AI version of me be any better in terms of a hit rate?
Well, this is rather predicated on the idea that you're good.
I'm good. That's a good point. There is a question: is it worth twinning me full stop? But let's assume someone wants that. I just think it completely robs the team of the actual autonomy and the requirement for them to think themselves and make decisions for themselves. And I think if you take that away, I just think work would become, the kind of the Black Mirror extrapolation of that is that people end up as these sort of slave drones that are asking AI what they should do day to day, and it just sounds awful. I think it would be horrific. That's one reason I don't like it.
Yeah, they don't. I will say they don't position it like that.
Yeah, I'm sure they don't.
They're not like are you? It's not. They're not selling it to leaders on the basis. It's more the other way around. I think they're kind of positioning it more like the boss wants to ask the people, and the people aren't there. But anyway, please go on.
If my organisation needs me to run day to day, then my organisation is fundamentally flawed. And to a certain extent, the organisation does, but every day we're working to reduce its reliance on any one individual. That's not just me. It's it's our MD, it's the general managers that we have, it's the analysts. We should have enough depth in the organisation that anyone can be taken out, including myself, and the organisation should continue to survive and thrive. That's one thing I hate. The second thing I hate is I'm very aware that I have quite an extreme personality. So I don't know whether you've ever done this. Have you ever done Facet 5 testing?
I have.
Yeah. So I can't remember the exact ins and outs, right, of Facet 5, but they basically they ask you a whole bunch of questions. You give answers about how you'd react in a situation and things. And then it profiles out your personality against 5 factors. And I can't remember the 5, but I remember 2 of them. One is called quick start, so your ability to just start something and get going. And then the other is called follow through, which is your ability you're a very methodical person who always gets to the end of a project, end of a task. I am a 10 out of 10, the maximum score you can possibly have on quick start, and a 0, not even a 1 or a 2, a 0 on follow through. So if someone comes to me and says, and actually you've experienced this when you said over drinks, should we start a podcast? Then the next week we had it published. And then you've spent the last 12 weeks, you've been basically following through and editing and doing all the actual work. And I've just turned up and recorded. So you've been a victim of that. And I surround myself with people who are high on the follow through, because I'm very good at coming up with ideas and I'm very good at getting things off the ground, but I know I'm very bad at actually following through and making things happen long term. So replicating that X or 100x or 1000x through AI sounds like a recipe for total disaster.
Well, of course. I mean, if we go to the marketplace idea, there may be organisations who are full of good follow through people, and they need someone who can come in and they need a Nick Chubb to come in and kick it off. They could maybe buy you in by the hour or something and just have you can't come in.
So the bits I quite like, I don't actually hate the marketplace idea, although, so the thing I actually really like, the thing that really makes me quite excited about that is having a way of capturing organizational knowledge at scale. So for example, we've got a small team with 15 people now, but we've had the last year we've had 3 people go off on maternity leave. When someone goes off on maternity leave, they're near enough out of the business. And so we've got very good in the last 12, 18 months at making sure before someone goes off that we've really, really documented what they do well. Often the people who we work with on our team, they're often quite creative types. And so making people sit down and actually write a process of something that happens organically is quite difficult and is a project in itself that you have to build time to make happen. Yeah. And then to do that in a way that someone else can just pick it up and run with it is also quite a challenge. And so if there was a way to capture through monitoring all of the chatter that exists through the organization, to capture and build structure around, what is the Theseus process for producing research? How do we produce a market landscape report? How do we produce a thought leadership report? If something could automate that process, we would become significantly more efficient as a business and significantly more resilient. And so that bit I really like.
This is a thing. I think you pitched me 3 ideas a while ago. I think one of them was relating to the fact that we've got this knowledge drain in our industry. It's something that's it's quite a concern, right? So just in terms of information about the business, and exactly as you say, one of the things that AI requires of the employee, we talked about this in the super worker episode as well, it requires that we start to kind of teach it about how things work around here to be able to kind of get it to work. So the idea that that could happen informally, because what worker is going to sit down and go, hey, yeah, sure, machine, I'm going to tell you everything about how to do my job. Like turkey's waiting for Christmas. But the idea that that's sort of picked up and becomes a knowledge base and a knowledge resource. I think I was going to talk about the feasibility of the digital twin, but I think if we talk about the feasibility of informally capturing and making sense of the day-to-day chats, which then capture the processes, capture the detail. And I think, in all seriousness, how many times have you had to take a call when you're on holiday to answer a question where it's as simple as, I'm really sorry to bother you, but where did we leave it with the so-and-so thing? Or where can I find? These are the sorts of things that are just bring you out of your nice vibey holiday, sitting guitar, watching the sunset, playing the guitar, whatever. And then suddenly you're being pulled back in, and it's that kind of thing. So I think feasibility, we can see that, and we can see the benefits of creating that knowledge base, right? I think, as you say, I think most of us can think that that's useful, and most of us can think is benign, right? To try and capture that. Let's just talk for a moment about the feasibility of capturing you in the way that is suggested by the twin thing, because the implication is that the bit of value that you bring to the organization can be sourced from all of your interactions with the business. And they are not claiming that they're recreating you. Okay. It's more at that kind of knowledge that what does that person know about the business? But the implication there for us as an industry is, when does that start to become really compelling? So look at the plus side. We have a big problem in the industry at the moment with mentoring, for example. We have some very high value SMEs, subject matter experts, which are disappearing because people are spending less time at sea. The industry itself is changing. So your point, if you've been ashore for 10 years, you have very little idea of how work is performed. And by the way, there's a whole bunch of stuff coming, alternative fuels coming through, some of these other types of technology. The knowledge base of, they haven't been around long enough to build that knowledge base that's there. So we have a problem domain for technology to potentially solve. How feasible do we think it is to A, try and capture the sum of that individual's knowledge, B, emulate some of those personality traits where the value is added? And that, I think, is probably quite a long way off, but it's an interesting thing to think about.
I feel conflicted about it. There was a great tweet, which I think I showed you last week, which was something like, just remember that somewhere in the world, the stupidest person you know is being told, that's a great idea by ChatGPT. And I think for me, that kind of sums up my overall concern about it. It's so early days. I think there's still real danger of these models being almost sort of slightly sycophantic to the point that they will tell you that things are great even when they're not. And I still really struggle with the idea, beyond the kind of process knowledge, I guess. I really struggle with the idea of taking away. It feels like it would very quickly rob people of their ability to make decisions. If you become reliant on someone or something else to make a decision for you, that's why you get a phone call on your holiday, for example, because the people working for you are reliant on you to make a decision.
You keep gravitating to this decision-making thing, right? Like when you're looking for a mentor or a counselor or whatever, that they're not supposed to be telling you what to do, right? They're not supposed to be making decisions for you, but they are supposed to be enabling you with the information you need or perspectives that you need and what have you. I understand your concerns. The bit that I think is interesting is to try and work out what it is about that value that individual is bringing to the organization, right? Are they just this knowledge repository who knows where everything is, who understands, who has that kind of, history about the business, who knows the status of the accounts, how the systems work, what to do when the software doesn't, when problems happen, how to fix them and all that sort of stuff. That's kind of like, that's stuff that people pick up in their journey through a company, and when they retire or they choose to leave, that leaves with them, and that potentially exposes the organization. And then you've got people, though, who are the kind of the glue, those that inspire, those that kind of give everyone a lift, those that are good in a crisis, those that make life fun, right, at work as well. And you might be thinking like, well, that's mental. How are you going to try and kind of qualify and copy that? What are we doing with music and film and art? We are taking something subjective. We are taking the work the artist has produced, decoding that, and then able to replicate the artist. So I'm suggesting to you that thing which I just positioned as being kind of like, that's crazy, how could we ever get there, that we could then replicate a person more fully, so not just their knowledge, but suddenly that agent, that twin, is at work in the business, adding a little bit of magic sparkle dust, whatever. But we're already doing that in a way that would have been unthinkable, to the point where an AI model can strip through, if the canon of work is big enough, the Beatles, let's say, and it will write you a song emulating that artist. And we already can see that it can do that. Now, let me tell you why that's an interesting argument. Because if that's where this is going, where you are actually saying, I want to be able to have, and Zoom CEO Eric Yuan has already explicitly talked about creating a digital twin clone that can attend a meeting on your behalf. I mean, I would struggle to tell the difference in some of the meetings I've been in.
I was just thinking that.
I'm also thinking about the number of times I would love to have sent my twin.
Yeah, I can record a video of me saying nothing for 30 seconds and staring at the 30 minutes and staring at the screen if you want. There would be no difference.
That was some much needed levity in where I was going with this, because that's the implication of where this ends up, right? If you were talking about an agent, a digital twin, the real implication here is that you are able to manifest and be somewhere. You can be an effective replica of you, can be somewhere else, doing something else, adding some value over there at the same time, either in amplification or in this kind of crazy idea with the marketplace, right? And why am I obsessing about that? Because just as we've seen artists' IP destroyed, we could be seeing human beings' IP destroyed, right? People book you because you are Nick Chubb, because you have the knowledge that you have, and because you have a personality, a very winning, charming personality that we all love. That's you. That's your IP. And if you choose to go and work for a company, that's you. That goes with you. That's your IP. People want you because you have your IP. If we start to think about a world where you could be hired for a year and they train and they figure out what's the secret sauce about Nick Chubb, and then, okay, Nick, we don't care if you leave because we've got this twin living with us now. This is just really crazy. I mean, imagine this idea that you don't belong to you anymore and can be recreated and put to work on things that you might not want to work on. I mean, it's just like, where do we even begin to think about that?
So there's a few things that spring to mind. Have you read Simon Sinek's The Infinite Game?
No, I've read a few of his, but not that one.
Well worth reading, right? So the Infinite Game, the kind of overall premise, I'll probably butcher it slightly, but he effectively says that, most games that we think of day to day are finite, right? So a football match, 90 minutes, the pitch is a rectangle, the size of the goals, and it's whoever scores the most after 90 minutes wins, right? That's a finite game. Every sport near enough comes in like that. There is some kind of scoring mechanism, there is some kind of end, and there is some kind of winner at the end of it. Computers are very, very good at finite games. Right, they're very, very good when you're given some kind of structure to work with. When there is a set structure, there's a known quantity of like how to win, how to not win, and actually a lot of how we've trained AI has been around building these kind of scoring mechanisms and rewarding and punishing based on that. And then there are infinite games, which is actually where there isn't necessarily a scoreboard, there isn't necessarily a deadline, and the game is about staying in the game for as long as possible. And the world of business, generally speaking, you are operating in some kind of infinite game. Is actually much more about creating something that has perpetuity, or as much perpetuity as possible, kind of building value along the way. And yes, there may be a scoreboard. Yes, it may be sales or it may be monetary, but there isn't like a cutoff point where you say, oh yeah, Apple won this year or Microsoft won this year. It is a perpetual thing. And that is where I think actually AI systems, computer systems really start to struggle. It is in that very ambiguous, you could near enough go off and do anything, and there's no very clear kind of goalposts at the point at which you get rewarded, that making those decisions becomes very difficult. And actually, I still think humans are fairly uniquely positioned to do that. And a lot of the work that we do, which is, boiling it all down is sort of consulting type stuff, it is about supporting those kind of decisions. And people say, look at music, look at art. Those are great examples of how AI is taking over creativity. Actually, nothing could be further from the truth, because when you take a back catalogue like the Beatles, there are rules. The songs are between 2 and 4 minutes. It's generally 4/4. It's generally in a major key. It's generally like 4 different chords. There's generally 3 verses and a chorus. Like, it is a finite game. And the song either sounds like the Beatles or it doesn't. So you know if you're winning or not. And actually, it's the same for design. It's the same for art. It's absolutely the same for music. And so AI is very, very good at taking that and sort of running with it. And experimenting around how to, within this sort of set of boundaries I've been given. A lot of art, or the arts, I should say, is actually very, very structured and built around rules, which is why we enjoy and appreciate it, because that's a lot of how our brains think. And a lot of business, and where I think companies like Vivien are kind of taking this stuff into the business world, it is all about ambiguity, and it is all about something that is more infinite and much more long term. And actually, I still think AI is going to struggle. AI will give you recommendations, and it will very happily do that. I just don't think necessarily they'll be the right recommendations because of an inability to think on that kind of level. And then one other thing as well is just like the general authenticity piece. Have you heard "I Run" by Haven? It's gone viral over the last sort of 6 weeks. It's like EDM track of kind of late 2025. It's a really good song. And then it came out about 3 weeks ago that the vocal track is entirely AI generated, and everyone's lost their minds. People are kicking off. It's been pulled off Spotify. So you now can't listen to it on Spotify because it's an AI track. And they claimed that there was an artist who'd sung it, and then the artist, I've never heard this in my life. So that the whole thing's sort of blown up. And actually, people are really rallying against it because of that kind of lack of authenticity and lack of that kind of human authenticity. And I think there is an element of that. I think people will always want stuff that is authentically developed by people. And then my third point to counter this is there is and should be, and if you're kind of in this game, then you need to think about this. There should be a separation between the individual and the IP, because there is always a risk that the individual get hit by a bus tomorrow. People book me to go and do the keynotes that you mentioned. It's almost exclusively Thetis IP that I share on the stage, including like the technology displacement framework is a Thetis technology displacement framework. It's not the Nick Chubb framework. And that has been developed over, a decade or so. And that has been kind of battle tested, through many, many engagements. And that's how we know that it works. But it is very much IP that is separate from me as an individual.
The work that you do for a company, typically, the contract will quite reasonably suggest that
is owned by the
company. No problem at all about that. Of course, that's totally sensible. I think where the line blurs, and let's actually probably easier to give an example of where this is problematic currently in a much simpler way. If you're an illustrator, someone likes your work, they will hire you because they want the personality you bring. Normally, the great stuff has a sort of a life to it, a personality to it. Typically, what would happen is you would be hired to do those illustrations, and then when they needed more illustrations later, they would bring you back and say, "We loved the ones you did before. Can we get you to do something like you did last time to these new themes?" With AI, the potential is that you bring somebody in, they create the illustrations for you, you've paid for it, you get the IP, but then they use that to train the AI to try and then replicate that. Now, that's a clear violation of the spirit of the engagement, right? Because you're taking that artist's work and you're sort of trying to circumvent needing to employ them again. Now, so this is something that is going on, that is happening right now. Another example is photography. So I would quite often do some shoots for marketing campaigns and stuff, and you might bring models in to, typically in my case, you're bringing in.
I thought you went modelling for a second there.
Well, there's another story. You bring them in, and typically we're hiring people who look like authentic seafarers, let's say, for example, and we'll take them in a number of different poses with walkie-talkies and, you know, all this kind of stuff that we might want, with hard hats and right. With AI, it would be possible to then say, you've done that extensive photo shoot. We don't want to have to hire those people back in again. Let's just put them into new poses. Now, photography agencies have got wise to that. When you're hiring in the mod, it will say, you know, any derivative works from this that are using these people. But that wasn't the case in the beginning. And so those are two examples that you can see that are happening now. I think what I'm talking about with the IP issue is that there's always something that an individual's bringing in. Let's say that the feasibility was there, that you could capture that secret source of that person. You could capture all of the things that they know and their sort of personality, and then you could put them to work after they've left the business. I think that's different. Do you get where I'm going? I mean, it's like, it is a gray area that we will clearly see exploited if this kind of technology takes hold. And it raises really ethical concerns as well. Like, one of the things that I noticed reading it a little bit, coming back to Vivien, one of the things that they were saying that clearly there's a privacy thing here, right? So if it's capturing everything, the conversations and all that sort of stuff that's happening in work, and they say in there that there's part of the algorithm that can detect whether it's a private conversation or it's about personal things rather than about work-related topics. It would be very, very difficult to separate. Like, yes, of course, there's like, I'm talking about my family, or I'm talking about, you know, what I did at the weekend, and it picks up those triggers. It's not picking up all of the kind of stuff that's kind of personal to you, in the sense of being like your style, the anecdotes that you tell, the memories that you share with colleagues that help to explain stories, and that, you know, all of that is going to be, that's your IP. That's your secret sauce. That's the thing that maybe differentiates you. So the idea that these things start to kind of become, you know, potentially commoditized is scary, I think.
Have you seen the new Sora app?
No.
So OpenAI, who makes ChatGPT, released a model called Sora about a year ago that is a video, prompt to video. So you type in whatever you want, ship sailing on the sea, photorealistic, and it'll create a video of it. They've now launched a new app for Sora 2, which is basically a TikTok style feed, and everything is AI generated. Everything is generated by Sora. But what you can do is, when you get the app, you have to scan your face and scan yourself, and then you can basically license yourself to the app. And so you can make your likeness freely available to anyone to use to do anything. And there's some very, very funny videos of like Sam Altman with roid rage, because he's done that, because he's made it freely available. Anyone on the internet can make a video of Sam Altman now, because he's licensed his face. But the way it works is you have to expressly grant permission. So if you had the app and I had the app, I could share my likeness to you, and you could make a video with me in, because I trust that you would do that with, you know, with my, at least I think, with my reputation in mind and all that sort of stuff. But if you make it freely available, anyone can take it. Someone has kind of hacked this system and made it possible to make videos of the late Queen, and some of them are like the Queen.
I've seen the
Queen in like a grime rap battle.
Yeah.
Some of them are really, really good. Or the Queen working in Tesco's, like doing a shift in Tesco's as the manager.
I've seen some of the output. I've seen Michael Jackson in the chicken shop as well.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that is potentially the world we're heading in. However, I just don't see that any kind of, once we go past the bubble and we actually get to the kind of, you know, if you follow the Gartner hype cycle, once we're kind of coming up the other side of the trough of disillusionment or whatever it is, I really struggle to see that AI is going to be interested in replicating stuff about my family or personal life, because I don't see that it's going to drive genuine business value. I can see all of that stuff getting filtered out for stuff that is actually genuinely drives business value, which again just really comes back to kind of process and IP and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that that's the interest, but I think that the idea that the worth of the individual, the contribution that they make, will be a mixture of tangibles and intangibles. And the intangibles is going to be a grey area, because it's not going to be that's where the analysis will eventually come down to that, right? It will come down to trying to capture more and more. And that's where it goes into areas that I think are ethically questionable. Because it means it's like maybe I'm being hysterical, but I kind of started to imagine a situation whereby you can, in a sense, you're never able to leave. You're still indentured, you might not have to turn up. And that takes us into the world of severance and all of those sorts of things. But anyway, look, I mean, we could go on and on and on. I think it's an interesting idea, and it's something that I'm going to be watching quite carefully, because there's a number of, good and bad dimensions to it. And as I say, to come back to the maritime example, I think we do have a knowledge drain problem. We do have that lack of availability of people with whom, there's high value SMEs that could contain all the knowledge and stuff like that. So I would be amazed if there isn't some sort of application for this in the maritime sphere.
I agree. Yeah, to bring it back, I do think the organizational knowledge drain thing is a real problem, and building any kind of resilience around that, I think, is really important. And therefore, if it can be done with AI, then let's do it.
Yeah.
But I don't see anyone in my organization wanting a twin of me.
Well, to come back to the Zoom CEO, Eric Yuan, talking about, your digital twin turning up to meetings, the idea that you could end up with a Zoom meeting where no one is real. No one is kind of, actually present. And I can say I've been in a few Teams calls where I've felt certainly that to be the case.
I think that sounds great if no one's present, but imagine being the only human in a room full of AI Teams meetings.
I felt like that sometimes as well. But let's not go there.
Well, on that happy note,
yeah,
as always, we've gone way over, but I will do something. Hold on, because I got trolled by Spotify. So I don't know if you can see this, but we have 142 followers on Spotify.
Wow.
And the average number of followers for shows like yours is 275.
Oh.
They just popped that up on the creator app. So it's an estimate based on the number of shows with a similar audience size in the past 30 days, which means we have a larger audience than our followership demand, and that's a good thing. But it also means that most of the people listening are not following. And if you're not following the show, then you're not going to get notified of the next one. So if you want more chat like this, please make sure you subscribe to the podcast, wherever you get it.
If you like the vibe, please subscribe, ladies and gentlemen.
That's never going to catch on. Right. Thanks, everyone. Have a lovely day.
Cheers.
Bye.